Welcome to the Practice Podcast, conversations probing the nature of practice. I'm your host, Dave Fearon, co-author with Peter Vale of the digital book on Practice as a Way of Being. Find it at mylibrary.world. And now to our show. This is a conversation with two very smart, caring people. Tom Casey, who is the founding partner of Discussion Partners, and Lizy Freudmann, whose company is called One More Thing, a marketing firm who does work for Tom and is a colleague. I asked them to talk about a study that Tom's firm came out with recently, where they found over 1,200 people sampled, a lot of pessimism, anger, and even rage about the state of affairs in the world, in the country, maybe in their location, and possibly in their companies. And this is not a happy story to share, but there are some things that come out of this conversation that are rays of hope for me, particularly listening to Lizy, who represents a much younger generation than do Tom and I. So without further ado, this is a conversation about pessimism. Folks, as I sail along in life, every once in a while, I get an email from one of our guests today, Tom Casey, which is a blog, announcing a blog that features something that the, what partners? Collaboration partners, Tom?
Discussion partners.
That's, see, I got it wrong already.
Yeah.
And that's all right, because people are used to me bumbling and mumbling until we get to something good. And the good is also having Lizy Freudmann with us, whose company is called One More Thing. It's a marketing, communications, and influence, and you name it, firm. And she's been on two of my podcasts. When I was saying about blog is that it suddenly makes my head snap back and I go, oh God. Or sometimes it's, oh, great. Because the research that Tom and his colleagues does it sometimes brings good news. I remember, Tom, our last one was when you had your partners read children's books.
Right.
And they found themes and inspiration and some clues to leadership, and how it's sort of engendered in us as little kids being read to by our parents or reading our own stuff. So this one, though, is different. This one is about pessimism that you're finding in the research. So get us started, Tom. Tell us what you are concerned about here in regard to leadership, because pessimism and leadership don't always go well together.
Well, David, thank you for having me back. And it's a great pleasure to join not only you, but also Lizy, who has been a collaborator with me from the way back. Okay. And frankly, keeps me honest on three things. One, social media, which I'm clueless about. Second is she brings in the Gen Z perspective. And third is,
I'm a millennial.
A millennial. Okay. See,
But you're closer to them than we are.
That's true.
We'll call it the youth perspective, but
There you
also
go.
the issue is what are people looking to learn, and how do you package it up? Okay.
Yes.
We were talking pre-recording here about management tome books by authors on leadership or whatever topic. They're passé. They've been deferred to podcasts, blogs, streaming articles, etc. So Lizy helps us on that. The research that you're referring to, as you know, Discussion Partners at its core is focuses on research, and we have the capability of a survey monkey that we use so frequently. They're looking for legal representation at this point. But during our meetings within the community, we talk about what we're hearing and what we're thinking. And what we began hearing late August okay, and into Labor Day, was that people were either irritated or anxious in advance of 2024. So we thought that that was a reasonable topic to ask our participants and research participants in. And over the balance of 2023, we got over 1,200 respondents. And the feedback was like reminiscent of people having a conversation with an ex-wife, and another thing, and another thing, all of the things that they didn't get a chance to really say on the way out of the relationship.
Oh my
Okay,
God.
they were either writing about it or they were leaving voicemails about it. And what we found was that we were surprised. We was not surprised by the vehemence of this, because frankly, we're human too. We have our own points of view in terms of how optimistic we should or should not be, but how specific they were about the things that were causing them concern. For example, a huge irritation manifested on immigration. Not a position that people want to take for or against migration. Okay, most people come to the realization that they're at most a third generation immigrant themselves. You know, so what happens is reasonable people express irritation with, and this is a quote, "For the love of God, would they just shut up and create a policy that would work? I'm sick of listening to the polarization. And if there's one more damn visit where somebody's standing at the border saying this needs to be fixed, I'm going to move."
South of the border.
No. Norway is coming up more frequently. Finland is a close second. Okay.
Yeah,
But
I get it.
that's
I get it.
that's irritation. That's
It is.
irritation.
Yeah.
And the anxiety is coming, frankly, because of all of the countries, including the US, that are going to be having elections this coming year or this year. Okay, I mean, you're looking at The Economist. One of their features in December was the challenges to a global democracy if former President Trump is reelected. You have The Atlantic dedicating a whole magazine and their TV show Washington Week, on the same topic. And the U.S. isn't alone. You're looking what happened in Poland, where the right-wing government was just thrown out, okay, because they went a little too far too fast in terms of extremism. But it's a huge issue. Okay, you see now President Biden kicking off his campaign, talking about democracy in his last two speeches in the last week. And what you're finding is people are anxious. Regardless of who they're supporting, they're anxious about what the outcome is going to be.
Sure.
And they're also anxious about the inputs to this, the chaos that President Trump likes to create. And frankly, there's the concern about President Biden's age. I find that.
I resemble that remark.
Well, it's
since he and I are the same age.
my birthday.
It's definitely there.
My next birthday candle this month is going to be 74, and I find it to be ironic, because everybody's complaining about President Biden's age, but they're, still standing in line to get tickets to the next Rolling Stones tour when two of these dudes are going to be over the 80s themselves. So, I mean, I understand people's concern, but it's just that.
Yeah.
What you have is this, there's a psychographic condition called epistemic anxiety. And that's what we were looking at, is people.
Yeah, you put that in the blog, epistemic. I thought that was quite interesting.
I may not even be pronouncing it correctly, but
epistemic. I don't know.
I think that the issue here is that people are just pervasively either upset or worried.
Yeah.
And that's what 1,200 people manifested to us. They were specific about it, but they were just worried.
What I picked up on was angry, and even the word rage.
Yeah, rage came up a lot.
Yeah.
So the most we tend to disaggregate the feedback as we get it. Okay. We were surprised by the word rage.
Yeah,
okay.
I was when I saw it in the blog.
Okay. With the three words that used the R's when we were comparing the quotes: rage, resentment, and revulsion.
Mm,
Now, you don't usually hear those when you do your research.
no. Yes, Liz.
I am shocked. I am shocked that you would be surprised by the word rage. Um, because what else is there? Um, if you are anxious and unhappy and feel pressured all the time, those are sort of helpless emotions. Rage is an empowering emotion. Rage makes you do something. So the
Mm.
way out of apathy is rage, and a motivation to change something. So I feel a lot of all of the discontent that was expressed by your survey respondents in very similar areas. And in particular, I feel like a sense of fatigue at having to listen to people talk about the same things over and over again. And it makes me disconnect, but then I have to reconnect
Yeah.
and do something about it. And the way that I can reconnect is rage, which makes me want to say, what can I do to change this? Because it's not an acceptable solution to me. I do not consent to this state of affairs.
Tom.
Yeah, I think that my wife and I were having this conversation after the Golden Globes. Um,
Mm.
and, comics who have bad delivery, bad humor, that's one issue. But some of the people who were accepting the awards could just have said thank you. Okay. Versus
They get 18
this,
seconds. They can use every
yeah,
bit of it.
well, they were making. There were a couple of people who were great. There were a couple of people who said, "Oh, come on," you know. Lizy and I have the benefit of working with a woman. We're collaborating. Her name is Wendy Lewis, and Wendy is the former director of diversity, equity, inclusion for McDonald's, and prior to that was Major League Baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And she and I had a scheduled call after the Oscars where Will Smith
Oh, yeah.
slapped Chris Rock. This is on global TV at an award ceremony. Now, Wendy's comment to me, and she's a woman of color, and very smart and very sophisticated, as Lizy can attest to, her comment was she thanked God that they were both Black.
Yeah.
I had the
Okay.
same thought, and I'm not
I-
Black.
I had the same thought, but I would have been a little bit reluctant to specify that
Yeah.
because look at what we were just witnessed with the speeches yesterday in South Carolina at that church.
Yeah.
Okay, where a white man went in with a gun and shot the parishioners,
Mm-hmm.
and both President Obama there showing that he knows how to sing, and President Biden there talking about white supremacy as is starting to reemerge. Okay,
Has it
and
ever gone away?
no, I don't think so. And I frankly think that the situation in Gaza is, tipping the iceberg back into anti-Semitism and anti-Islamic. But what's happening is, and this goes back to Lizy, your astute comment on rage, is we need to get upset with this stuff, or it's only going to get worse.
Is
Yes.
is that your point, Lizy? Because I saw a
Yes.
reaction there.
Yes. And chiming in for the millennials here, we, President Biden's age, I'm not really qualified to judge whether he's got, cognitive decline or whatever. But what I do see is that he is the only person really that comes to mind as having enough status in the Democratic Party to get that nomination, which shows to me the failure of the party to invest in younger, upcoming leadership for decades.
Succession. I
Yeah,
think that's
and
Tom's business too.
my generation feels smothered by the fact that we have only so much upward mobility because all of the major management positions have and continue to be held by boomers and some Gen Xers. And like, so we are just biding our time, really. And that's why so many folks can't afford to buy houses and all these other things. So for those of y'all who have sort of kept the reins of power for as long as you have, why aren't you angrier? Why aren't you like standing there and saying, no, thank you. Do not say this on behalf of me. Like, we don't consent to this kind of climate. We don't want American engagement in foreign wars that may or may not benefit American people and certainly don't benefit citizens around the world. We want a country that stands for justice. We don't want a criminal being elected into the highest office in the land. Like, how did we get here?
Yeah.
And the answer is a lot of people got pessimistic and shrugged their shoulders. And so you can't opt out.
I think Tom is not going to shrug his shoulders, though, Tom.
Yeah, I think Lizy, you're right. You're really onto
right,
something.
Lizy.
You're really onto something. The lack of proactivity and the lack of rage and the lack of involvement is becoming universal. And I don't think that's necessarily driven by Gen Z, millennials, boomers, and the older boomers. Okay, you know what's happening is disrespect is becoming the norm. Okay, and that infuriates me. When David and I were talking about the children's books, this was back.
Yeah.
And I used the example of then President. By the way, this conversation, David, you're going to lose all of your MAGA listeners by the time the three of us are done. You know, you're going to lose.
I'm not going to regret that.
Yeah, David, you're going to lose both of them. But the reality, the reality is, we were talking about President Trump, former President Trump, was giving a speech,
criminal Trump,
where he was actually ridiculing, the assault on Nancy Pelosi's husband in California.
Yeah,
at the Republican convention. It just happened that previous weekend, and people laughed. I thought that was obscene.
Yeah.
I thought that was obscene as the same dude talking about President Biden's speech and pretending to stutter.
Yeah.
Have we devolved into that point
picking on
where the survey results that we got are a manifestation of how people are feeling, because disrespect, rudeness, just friggin' stupidity is becoming normative behavior. And there's all kinds of problems out there that need to be addressed by reasonable people who just suck it up, don't think about their expediency, and want to work the problem. Again, a recent example that we put into the research was this young governor of Pennsylvania, when that bottom fell out of the I-95. And all of the experts were talking, this is going to take months to put back in. And he essentially said, I don't have months, man. Okay, so he assembled, working with the feds, working with Secretary Buttigieg, working with the agencies, working with the legislator, working with the experts. They were back up and running in 12 days.
I think that's what Lizy was talking about. When younger people see something like what you just cited, Tom, I think it gives them a sliver of hope, don't you, Lizy? That, hey, they can get stuff done.
Well, no, it's not they, it's we. They have chosen not to get stuff done because that is how the business of life has been for whatever reasons.
Exactly.
And let's just go around them is really what I feel. So there are two things that I wanted to share as I was sort of preparing for this. One is a quote that comes up over and over again for me in my life that I think about at various stages, and it always means something a little bit different. But it's the Zora Neale Hurston quote, if you are silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it. And I feel like that is a really great picture of this moment. And we don't want to be misattributed when we are no longer here to say, actually, no, I was not okay with that. So now is the moment to say, no, I'm not going to let you take several months to rebuild my highway.
Yeah.
I'm going to find another way around it because.
Yeah. Well, I'll edit this part. Yeah. She's
Okay.
got a really
Am I
good point.
back?
You're back.
I'm back.
You're back.
Sorry. I don't know what the last thing you heard was.
Well, you quoted that very chilling quote and talked about how people are going to not wait any longer and work around it. My hunch is that there are a lot of very angry people in Philly, and that governor was not going to be going to work and then without 100 people yelling at him if he didn't get that thing fixed.
Yeah.
Baltimore or anywhere else. They weren't going to let that happen.
And he had just been, I'm sorry to interrupt you, David. He had just been elected.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Didn't have his act together. Yeah. I want to ask a question for both of you, because both of you in your own way are like I, very interested in getting things done and who does it and how we can support those people who do get things done through messaging and your point and positioning and other things, Lizy, but with Tom, really one-on-one kinds of coaching and urging and essentially convincing sometimes that they can go ahead and get things done. I, on my hand, remember something that Peter Vail said many times in our book and in the podcast, which is, if you want to know where leadership happens, look for a change. It's either ahead of the change, but one of the first, as we are now with this study, who are recognizing these things and have to do something, or during or after, because after the change, the leader is the one who's leading the learning. Okay, guys, what are we learning on I-95 now that we can apply to other situations? So we have no question a movement toward global pessimism about who can lead us to get things changed. We have not lost our interest in things being changed. So what can we do to help the people who are mustering the chutzpah to push to get things done?
Well, I mean, the really obvious answer is give them money. That is that is always the roadblock. In some way or another. But I think part of it is, and this conversation comes at an interesting time where I've been thinking about how I spent my time in 2023 and how I'm going to spend it in 2024, and looking at Tom's list as like, all of these things are true and I cannot fix them all, but I can fix some of the things in some of the places for some of the people. And so narrowing down where I'm going to focus my energy and sort of setting an internal goal for what that looks like, and finding partners in that project and finding some money and figuring out a way to build a coalition. And specifically, in Louisiana, we've just elected and was sworn in this real dirtbag Trumpian governor. And he's openly stated he's coming after New Orleans because we're like a crime capital. He's gonna send in straight troopers and then. And so that means, like, on a very local level, like, people in my neighborhood are gonna need more help than they did before.
That's right.
That's something I can perhaps have an impact on. That's where I'm going to put my energy this year, I think.
Well, that's your personal answer, but also a generic answer to people who are. Pick something among all the issues, because there's so damn many.
You can't
and put together with others something that will make a change. Tom, what do you think of that?
I like the logic, and let me extend it. I think that part of the thing, and this is me and my dotage collaborating with Lizy as a millennial. Okay. And periodically she and I will have these conversations about, we just need to dust off the playbook. Okay. And, you know, not think we have to start all over again with a blank sheet of paper. The playbook for making change is very straightforward. You pick your target of opportunity. You learn as much as you can about it. You don't get distracted by the polarization. And you get in the game.
Yeah.
So that to me is the playbook. That's what, you know, I was sending Lizy's logic to a tactical the problem that we have, I think, is threefold. And please feel free to push back on this. One is we've just gotten numb.
Yes.
Okay, going back to 2008 with the
Yeah.
global financial crisis, you know, to the point where we're exhausted. Okay, between the
Yeah.
global financial crisis, COVID,
Yeah.
the chaos of the elections, the invasions of your neighboring countries, the terrorism that's focusing,
School shooting.
and the devolution moves, and not challenging things like white supremacy, racism, anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim activities. I think that, you know, we've just got numb. We got to get unnumb.
Yes.
And we got to get unnumb real fast.
I agree with
And-
that. Go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
No, and just to finish the thing, when we were reading the results, when my brothers and I were reading the results, you know, we had a conversation as, well, that's interesting. Now what?
There you go.
You know, and, you know, we were having the conversation, well, maybe this is our wake up call too.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, I mean, there's some interesting science on the amount of information our brains can take in per day and how much more information we're getting than we can process in a meaningful manner just through social media, like television media, walking down the street, the number of people we see every day. It's so much information. I think that we need to be intentional about what kind of content we consume and who we allow into our bubbles. Now, I want to be really careful about what I say because I don't want it to seem like I'm saying only allow people who agree with you, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that, like, we need a diverse opinion, like diverse backgrounds, diverse expertise, but like we need to be selective about the credentials that those people bring to the table and how much time a day we spend giving to like armchair experts on YouTube, and to ask whether they're contributing something real or just their opinion, and how much of their opinion we need in our lives. Yeah, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that there's an article. There's a former professor at the Naval War College, also taught at Harvard, a gentleman named Tom Nichols, who writes for the Atlantic right now. And he wrote a book that I read during COVID called The Death of Expertise.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I remember that. I didn't read it, but I heard about it. Yeah.
And, you know, my takeaway from reading this book is that we are overwhelmed with input from people who do not deserve our time. Okay, I call
That's a quote right there.
Yeah, the thing is, you know, and the redundancy of the stupidity and the lack of thought that they provide as input into this narrative. And frankly, their lack of credentials to have a platform to even open their mouths, or God forbid, I don't know if they know how to write. I get a little sick of. But unfortunately, we're subsumed with this iPhone.
Yes.
Nobody I've ever gone near an elevator with doesn't have their phone out first.
Yes.
Or at a dinner table for that matter. Yeah.
There's a New York Times article, I can't remember the author, but it just came out as some woman threw away her iPhone in favor of the flip phone for the purpose of phone is for talking. Okay, and she started talking about how she can sleep at night. Okay, because she's not waking up, checking the latest news, and then working on her Christmas list. Now, she also can't validate when she needs to get a password. But, you know, we've come to rely on the phones for other things. But these phones are dangerous because
they
of the
are.
amount of information that is there and the irrelevant information that we're asked to consume.
I think, Lizzie, that's sort of the delivery system that
Yeah,
Tom
I
has put his
agree.
finger on that makes us feel overwhelmed and gives us too many choices to choose the wrong inputs. Yeah.
I agree. So if we're looking for solutions for how we overcome pessimism, one of my pieces
Yes.
of advice would be really selective of what you put inside your brain, because that's going to either make you feel inundated and like you're drowning in things that you can't possibly change, or it may help you learn new tools for creating change. Understanding what you need to feel okay so that you have the energy to do what you want to do.
Yeah. Tom?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I don't know when I began hearing this from the doctor, but the words diet and exercise seem to be normative every time I, am building, having my insurance. And this goes back to what I'm talking about, dusting off the playbook. I don't think that this isn't. I just think we need to get back to it in terms of knowing what the right things to do and just doing. Because I think that what's happened is the numbness is set in. The numbness is dangerous. People are taking advantage of it. Okay. I saw an interesting statistic on the news last night. President Trump, his fundraising increased every time he showed up in the court.
That's why he's doing it today.
He's in court today.
Mhm.
He doesn't have to be there. Okay. And I'm very curious as to see if that phenomenon will increase, that he goes, and he's in court today to listen to the defense of his attorneys as to whether or not a president of the United States could be held accountable.
Interview, yeah.
Okay. And I don't see how that can go for him, but I would hate to think he shows up in court to defend something that is an obscenity to me, and it's only going to get him an increase in funding.
Yeah.
That to me is an encapsulation of the situation that we're in right now. And that's why I think it's dangerous. This is where the numbness is. We don't even think along those lines anymore. This is just the environment in which we are either tolerate it or go crazy. I'm sorry.
Insult to injury. Go ahead.
What
Lizzie.
I struggle with is like, where do I find the compassion for people who see this man show up to court, who does not care about them at all, and are like, let me empty my pockets for you, my hero? Because that is not rational thought. That is somebody who has been the victim of coercive control or some sort of like brain hijacking, similar to what you see in cults. And there are some really interesting cult experts who will talk about the way that like the community of Trump reflects the cult. So but like, you can't free them from this without compassion. And so I don't know, like, I am a pro rage kind of person, as we've covered already. Like, rage is an activating thing, but compassion is also important. How do we free people from the tyranny of a life where they are writing checks to a felon because they think he is so spectacularly perfect in every way?
I want to throw one other point out there.
David, before you do, I'm getting more pessimistic, given this is the topic of this podcast.
we're bringing Tom down here.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, not really. I think this is very
that's-
hopeful conversation.
I did renew my Xanax prescription this morning, so we're in good shape.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What
Go ahead,
I
Dave.
wanted to say is, since in several of the podcasts that I've had with Tom and some of his other partners, and beyond that, it comes back to the question of people working in organizations and those who lead them. Now, the people we've talked about, including the ones you just mentioned, Lizzie, I assume one way or another are employed. and they're bringing their attitudes, they're bringing sometimes their rage to work if they're actually physically together, and sometimes they can do it virtually. This is a workforce change as well as a societal shift. And if I were a senior manager overseeing a group of people, I would be very concerned about reading your partner's blog and going, oh my Lord, how can we not have people who are buying the myth in our employ, so we can have people who think and want to change and follow me and don't look at me as the bad person here. So I threw out this huge question, and I'm telling you, we don't have much time. I'm going to give Lizy the first shot at it.
Okay, so I'm a marketing person. I really am fascinated by cognitive behavior. One of the things that is really interesting to me that I've sort of done an intellectual hobbyist dilettante deep dive into the past couple of years is cult mind control. And let me get back to, and I promise this is going to come around. One of the leading cult experts is a man named Dr. Stephen Hassan, and he wrote a book on the cult of Trump. I prefer referring to cults as high demand groups in the sense that they require so much of the members who are in those groups. They have to be isolated from their families a lot of times. They have to give money away a lot of times. So much of who they are gets sacrificed to this group identity. And Dr. Hassan is a great scholar because he was in a cult for a time. He was in the Moonies, and he's come up with a model of what does it mean. And so he's a really interesting person to look to if you're interested in understanding how somebody's brain can get co-opted by a fraud like Trump, and they can end up writing these checks to people, and what it will take to help them regain their ability to think critically and to analyze their own, like find themselves in outside of the group identity. So I would recommend him as a scholar and as an expert in this particular area. Maybe it will help organizational leaders create a more harmonious and safe place for people, because as I was like, the compassion to help somebody leave a high demand group, whether it's like a weird religious fringe denomination or if it's the cult of Trump, you need to give them space to be free from it and welcome them back. And so that is something I struggle with, balancing my rage and my compassion to give people space to recover what I was say and like learn how to act in their own best interest through the application of critical thought. So that is what I was going to say in response to that. And now it is Tom's turn.
Tom.
Yeah, I think that because it was a study that we just did, let me compare a study that had just preceded it. We had done a study in August of our C-suite population. And what are the things that you're preoccupied by as we enter the next commercial year? Okay. AI was on that list.
Yeah.
Okay. It went from 0 to, most frequently mentioned. Okay. So we published those results. Then we turn around and we do a study about what are you worried about in mass population for 2024. AI was never mentioned.
Isn't that something?
Okay. So what happens is, and I want to revert this back to your question about leadership. Leaders, whether they be in the commercial space or the NGO space, et cetera, they're worried about growth and sustainability.
Sure.
Okay, their behaviors have to be modified based on the temperament of the associates that they're dealing with. David, you and I have talked about decades of research on leadership. Words like empathy, transparency, and accountability were mentioned, but they weren't mentioned as having to have.
No,
as part of your leadership.
That's the New Deal, as you brought it out. Yeah.
Right. So when I'm thinking about the where we are I'm actually am more optimistic than pessimistic. Okay, because I do think that shame on us if we don't use the next year to fix some of these problems.
There you go.
Okay, that's where I can come out. Shame on us. I mean, shame on me for just talking about it, writing about it versus showing up at meetings, writing some checks, and all of this, shame on me. And
I can still write a check. I think that.
Yeah, I did. Well, basically, that's why I try to stay away from my phone. I think I may get a flip phone just to stay away from that. But the thing that I'm optimistic about is, if we're really serious about some of these problems, there's the political races, but there's also the environmental issues. There's the concern about the principles that are being debated as it relates to the invasion of Israel and the response of the Israeli government to that. Okay, and the thing that I keep coming back to is, shame on us if we don't take a position and then do something with our own principles and belief system. If we just sit there in our barca lounges looking at the news, whether it's Fox News or MSNBC, shame on us.
Yep. Lizy, I'm going to give you the last word, because I'd love to want to add another hour to this, but my listeners probably are looking for their, hopefully our listeners, if whoever they may be, are agreeing with this last point. 2024 is now the time to get some things done.
It is now the time. And I mean, I don't know if this is the right last word here, but it's my last word, which is you can actually do something every single day to make it better. And you just need to figure out where your lane is and build that into your life. And maybe it is writing a check, but maybe it is also narrowing your focus to something that can make a difference in the world that you touch. Don't let the vastness of the problems make everything feel unsolvable.
My last word to that is amen. Thank you, Tom Casey and Lizy Freudmann, friends. And I'm honored to have this conversation with you, because, damn it, now I've got to get out there and do something in 24 as well.
You do.
I'm on the hook, and I'm happy to do so. So thank you again, folks. Thank you for listening to the Practice Podcast, conversations probing the nature of practice. If you'd like to hear more, go to Automatic, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. And please consider purchasing our book on practice as a way of being at mylibrary.world. It's a digital book with lots of features that you do not see in a conventional book. So once again, thank you, and I look forward to you listening again. Oh, and one more thing. Please check out our webpage at inactionresearch.info.